Something that I really believe deeply is that there should be a process and we should have clear definitions of how AI supports elements of a process and where human thinking is centered in that process.
I'd rather look at policy not only as guidance, as we know it happens, but also as protecting meaningful student learning in the essence of the policy.
AI doesn't know students the way teachers know students. And I think that's vitally important now to protect and preserve that human element.
Welcome to today's Education Vanguard. In this episode, we're bringing you highlights from a powerful panel facilitated by Cora Yang at the 21st Century Learning Conference, titled Balancing Innovation with Ethics. Where should we draw the line with AI in schools? Cora sat down with three remarkable educators, Roberta from Avenues Shenzhen, Alex from Shanghai American School, and Douglas all the way from Menlo School in Silicon Valley. They explored how schools can harness AI while protecting what matters most, meaningful student learning, as well as the most irreplaceable element of that, which is human teachers. So over to the panel.
We all know AI in school is not a future problem, and it's the every single moment we're facing this problem. Our students are using AI, whether we know it or not. So I think it's quite important. And the question isn't if AI belongs to education. The question is if we get it right. So today we're having three amazing panelists here, and they're gonna share their insights on this part. So I'm gonna let them to introduce themselves. Roberta, can we have the first?
Hi everyone, my name is Roberta. I am a teacher. I want to start by saying that, although I'm not in the classroom for a while. I'm from Brazil, and I have been working here in Shenzhen for the last almost 3 years, but at the same institution for 8. But I've been in schools, I think, since my mom had a school. I used to have Sunday dinner over teacher schedules and things like this. So schools have been part of my life since I can't even remember otherwise.
I am Alex McMillan. I work at Shanghai American School, Wuxi campus. I'm an instructional coach, but I'm going to piggyback off of that idea. I'm a teacher first. This is almost my 20th year abroad. I've been living in Asia the whole time, just how it happened. But Asia is my home. And I think I like to call myself an instructional coach because I focus on what's important, student learning first. And then technology, things like AI should support that.
Thank you. I'm Douglas Kiang, and I'm a computer science teacher from Menlo School in the Bay Area in California. We're right in Silicon Valley. We teach a lot of the children of the executives at a lot of these AI companies that are really changing the world right now. And I have that perspective from being there. I've been teaching for about 30 years. I've taught in all different grade levels, started in elementary school. I taught CS at Harvard, and then everything in between. I've worked with the College Board on developing the AP Computer Science Principles curriculum. And things really ramped up about a year or so ago when they realized all the kids were turning in the create task was all AI generated. So we then had to scramble and come up with sensible guidelines. And now we're able to we assume they're using AI. We tell them they can use AI, but they still are now being held accountable with an in-test right to prove that they actually understand what the code is doing.
All right, thank you. Before we're gonna hear from our panelists, I would like to take a temperature from the room. By showing of your hands, can you please raise your hands if how many of you have an AI guidance document at your school that you feel quite confident about? I think some of the hands are like, I'm not quite sure. So I think you are in the right place because today we're gonna talk about a lot of ethical bottom lines about having AI in the school, in the educational context, and more like from change management perspective. Let's start from what it matters the most in the classroom. So I'm gonna bring this question to Douglas and Alex. Students are already using AI, and whether we're ready or not. So what does teaching with AI ethically looks like in this day-to-day teaching practice? And so what's still very tricky to get it right?
Thanks. So I'll field this one first. I think defining ethics in schools means coming back to our core values. And I've seen Cora, Dalton, and many other AI leaders in this space echo similar sentiments. So our schools have core values. It's often things like honesty or fairness, generosity, and I think those are often universal values that many different cultures share. So I would go back to that language and specifically use that language because it's something you can anchor your learning inside of. So just a quick example, because that was very theoretical. Let's say that we value honesty. So what does that mean when we're honest and we use AI? In Douglas's case, maybe you might be asking your students, please disclose or share how you use AI as a part of a process. Or if you really value, I'm just saying another concept off the top of my head. Let's say if you really value creativity, how did AI support your creativity? Where was the human? Where was the human plus AI in that process? So something that I really believe deeply is that there should be a process and we should have clear definitions of how AI supports elements of a process and where human thinking is centered in that process. So in the case of secondary schools where I'm based, maybe students can start to think about their own process. And I think in university, as they get a little bit older, they can have more and more independence. So I imagine there's a continuum of independence with processes, but anchoring it in those core values, I would say.
What we saw this fall with student attitudes is the first thing students try to do when they come into the classroom is figure out whether the teacher is cool with AI or not. And if the teacher gives any hint that they're anti-AI, the students will clam up. They won't admit to using it at all. They won't say anything. They're still going to use it. They just won't say anything about it. Teachers who are more open and say, I'm curious, how are you using it? How could you use this? If you have a shared value that we're all in this together for the learning or to develop these skills, if the students buy into that, if they see your class as more than just busy work, what we found is they will be much more forthcoming about their use of AI because that is the reality. They're all going to be using it. When they enter the work world, they will be judged harshly on their ability to use AI intelligently versus kids who are only used to doing it themselves and have never used AI at all. I'm teaching a class now that's what we call an AI forward class. And an AI forward class at Menlo School is classes where we try to use AI in as many ways as possible. As long as it is not to the detriment of our learning, we try to start with how could we use AI to do this? And my partner teacher gave a comment on a student paper that got turned in. Her comment said, this sounds like AI. And so they went and they had the conversation. The student said, I swear, it wasn't AI, it wasn't AI. She said, well, that's not the point. The point is that the writing is flat and it's cliched and it sounds like AI. And if you used AI, then that's why it's writing that way. And if you wrote it yourself, then you're writing like AI. But the main point is not whether you used AI or not, it's that the quality of the writing is not there. And so how do we get you to elevate the quality of what you're turning in, either through a better use of the tool or by developing your close writing skill? And I think that's pretty much where we're going to be going. I think it's silly at this point for me to ask my kids to cite every place they used AI. They're using it all the time everywhere. I think what's much more important is I want to know when kids did the work themselves. So I think, if anything, we're going to see an inversion where perhaps there will be a little bit of a cachet to saying, this was completely written by me with no AI. For certain enterprises like art, where I think the human endeavor, the human portion of it is important. But the reality of it is there's going to be AI blended into everything. There's going to need to be, because the volume of work, the expectation is going to rise. So I think that it's just not necessarily where I want the world to go, but I think it's reality and we have to adjust to it.
Thank you so much. It's quite interesting hearing that, especially you also mentioned about the students would change their attitudes about being transparent using AI based on the teachers. That's quite interesting. Thank you. So we talk about what happens in the classroom, and you know that individual teachers can only do that much. And at some point, it becomes an institutional question. So this is a question for Roberta and Alex. Policies without buying just become shelf documents. And so when you were trying to get the whole school moving forward towards that direction, what actually works? And what resistance have you had encountered and have you have to navigate?
I forgot to say when I was introducing myself, I said I'm a teacher, but I forgot to say I'm director of technology now. So that's why the question about institutional role came to me first. But this is important because I think as much as I come from the classroom. There is an institutional need with discussing this, right? Because these policies are usually discussed on an institutional level. They are expected to be applied in the classroom level, but how does this discussion happen is what we really are thinking about. I think I still see policies being used sometimes as protector of institutional face, as in China, I think I can say that. But I'd rather look at policy not only as guidance, as we know it happens, but also as protecting meaningful student learning in the essence of the policy. Because if we stick to that, then the document has value. If we stick to trying to predict how things can go wrong and how can we protect ourselves from everything, in this age that we're living now, it's going to be very hard to come out with something that really is worth reading even, right? Or stays evergreen regardless of the changes that we are seeing lately. I think we can rush to write a policy. It's fine. We can even use AI and collect a bunch of policies that have been written already. I will still think about, can this policy live through the writing? So I'll quickly cite, like, it was 2022, the beginning of the generative AI boom with ChatGPT coming out. I was in Brazil at Avenues in São Paulo, and a lot of media attention went to the schools back then. And because Avenues was an innovative school and like open to change, they came to us, main newspapers, wanting a statement from the school, like, how are you going to deal with this? So it's important that institutions know what to answer. And this goes back to the values that Alex mentioned, and we can go into this later. But I think, write your policy, make it evergreen in the possible way of connecting to what really stands for the institution, but really make it capable of being practiced in the school. That's the key thing about, if you just write it for the sake of protecting the institution, it's not going to really work for who's in the classroom.
Thanks. I agree with everything that I'm hearing. I'm learning a lot from this panel, so I'm getting a lot out of this as well. Thanks. I think I want to build on some of those ideas by saying yes, and I think that all policies are almost shelf documents. I like that phrase a lot. And I don't really think I know anybody who leafs through a policy for fun or regularly at that. I think when I think about effective policies, they build shared language, and I think that's important. I'm hearing that and responding to the media when people are asking, or parents are freaking out, what are we doing with AI? We have that shared language. Or in the case that we're talking about our shared values in our class and how we are operationalizing our shared values in the day-to-day with our students, could you imagine if we didn't have that shared language and there was a student who had something that had a flat tone, like your colleague had said, and there's no language that we can use to describe it. But once we have a policy, a guidance document, our shared values, whatever it is, it's about having that shared language so we can talk about it. But I think it shouldn't stop there. You start by writing the policy or whatever it is, but then you need to operationalize it within your institution. And I think that comes down to, how are we training our people? I'm sure I'm preaching for the choir here. We're all doing PD with teachers and we're here today. But how do you then operationalize a document? Should be phase 2. So now we've got a document that's probably dense as hell, but what do you do with it? I think that comes down to people like coaches or people who use coaching with adults. It's often with teams. How do we plan? How do we implement this shared language? How do we get students using AI in effective ways to support their learning? And what are, I hate this phrase, but KPIs, like what is our measurement of success going to look like? What are we looking for in this case? So I think it's a shelf document. If we write it and then we never actually use it, it should be like our action plan, so to speak.
Thank you both. And I think I totally agree with Alex. I've learned so much from this panel discussion, and it's way beyond my expectations. I know I would have learned a lot, but now I'm learning like a lot. And I like what both of you mentioned about it needs to down to the practice, right? So now we talk about how. Let's talk about limits. And this question for Douglas and Roberta. If you had to draw a very hard ethical line about scheduling pros with AI, this is a hard question, and regardless how promising the technology looks like, what would that be and why?
I think, again, I'm going to go right back to the shared values idea. It's almost impossible to anticipate all of the different things that could come about where kids are going to have to make hard decisions. And so we created a values document. And this, in fact, is something that Anthropic has done with Claude. So Claude is an AI. And what's the difference between Claude and ChatGPT and a lot of these others is instead of having a big rules list saying you can't do any of these things, they created what they call a Claude Constitution, which says we want you to be helpful. We want you to help people without enabling them to harm themselves. We need you to exercise good judgment. It's a fascinating document to read. You can look it up. And I think that has a lot of parallels to kids as well in terms of, I don't know what the specific lines should be, except for the fact that we want to define the kinds of behavior that we want to see. Something that's happening right now at our schools, we're going through the WASC accreditation. So we had all of our teachers brainstorm this whole document about what are our shared values, what's special to us, what kinds of areas are we growing in. And we took all of their answers, this huge document, and we gave it to AI. And we said to AI, give us the top 5 themes that came out of this document. And it came up with a list, things like small class size and rigorous curriculum. It had 5 things, and we looked at the list, and it was a good list. And it was accurate. And so the teacher said, great, let's move on. But I said, hold on a second. How do we know what the AI didn't include? There might have been nuggets buried on page 11 that some teacher added because it really matters to them. But we don't see those because we ask AI to give us a list. It gives us a list. We look at it. It is accurate. And then we move on. And maybe it brings up those 5 particular things because that's what every school does. Those are the common things, the predictable things. And I think that's the biggest danger with AI is not the accuracy of what it gives us, but the fact that what it gives us is pretty good. And then nobody ever sees stuff that could potentially be better because we stop looking. Everybody kind of moves on. So I think the big challenge for us as educators is making sure that we're creating an environment where if AI gives someone at your school an answer, there's a part of them that's still saying, what is missing here? What is not here? And I think that's the crucial thing that could potentially be lost. And so teachers are going to ask, what's your policy? I think instead of I give them a question rather than a rule. And the question would be, is the value in this assignment what the student is producing? Or is it who the student is becoming through producing this artifact? And I think if teachers can answer that clearly, then they don't need a policy document. Right? AI doesn't know us the way we know us. So for teachers, they're having conversations with students saying, can you tell me why you wrote this? Tell me what decisions you made about this writing. Explain this to me. AI doesn't know students the way teachers know students. And I think that's vitally important now to protect and preserve that human element.
I was going to go back to core values. I swear it's the last time, but it's just because it's so clear when we all talk about it, we go back to that because it's the base of everything, right? So I think the line for me lies in the ability for the institution to uphold the values that we're claiming we have. So I think what AI is doing right now is test pressuring that because of the speed and the mass movement around this. And it's only imaginable that we have to look into this and use it and experiment. I love when you said that your teachers are really putting that to the test. I think the institution is also tested around its values at this time. So thinking about practical things that happen, and I'm sure that depending on where you are in the school, you will have faced that in different ways. A month ago, we got an email from a parent saying that we were not allowed to use AI with his kid. At no stage in the creative process, he didn't agree with that. It was completely forbidden. This is like a big test for the institution. What are the values that we share here? So you said teachers and students, they know. The students know better, the teachers know better. I think the institution has to know really where it stands right now and try to accept the challenge that this technology is bringing to these values and these shared understandings. So answering to that in a way that we can reclaim our values and say, but you chose a school that opened 10 years ago with the spirit of breaking down some concepts and experimenting and being open to looking into what's new. How can we forbid this to enter our school doors, right? So I think, yeah, because of one kid. So I think it's really testing everyone's values, including our parents. So it depends on what type of education you believe in and how do you make that happen in school, of course, responsibly, but at the same time, standing behind what you say you are, the values with like, at Alvinus we say welcome, safety, and respect. In Japan, they say courage, compassion, and care. I don't know. There's always a way to connect those core things because what's the most stable thing right now in a school? Those things, right? These are like things that don't change. The bottom of them, it's like there. So AI, we don't know. I had a parent in an open house in ELC asking us how we're going to work with technology moving forward. And I just reminded them that when we create their kid's email address, we use the graduation year. And this kid was 2039. So if every 3 weeks we have new tools and new capabilities with AI, how come I answer to these parents what kind of work we'll be doing with technology when they're graduating? So it's really believing in the way we teach and learn. And there will be other things that will come in the way or along the way, as I prefer to see it. And we'll test pressure these values all the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I do know that I was doing this parent workshop and that the parents asked one question pretty interesting. They said, if AI is so advanced, then what are you doing as an educator in the classroom? So if you notice, there's a knowledge gap between what actually educators are thinking, the school's vision and values, which those kind of keywords we mentioned quite a lot, and between the other stakeholder. So we notice like this is actually quite important to have the whole community alignment, knowing that the all different stakeholders, they have share the same language, like I mentioned, the same knowledge and on the same page. So before we're gonna close, I want to open up this a little bit briefly. We have a room full of educators wrestling very similar questions and the issues we have it. Does anyone have any questions or something you want to share? Any challenges? Don't make the question very difficult for them. But you can tweet where I think one or two. If it's too difficult, it's their thing. So anyone?
A couple of times actually it was mentioned earlier, I think Doug, you said it and Heron, but we've all had this approach where the answer to, not necessarily the answer, but one of the reasons for using the things that we use is it's the way the world is going, so we better get ready for it because our students need to get ready for it. And then balancing that with Roberta, your parent, is there something ethical to think about that? Should there be a better reason to introduce our students to these things than just everybody else is doing it? The world has to go that way. Yeah, ethically, what is that? How do we answer that question?
I think we can all try to answer. In that case specifically, which I'm not going to go into details, but I'm in favor of experimentation in schools with responsibility, right? So I feel like when we begin exploring AI, we try to do it in a decentralized way, involving the teachers and the students as much as possible in a safe way. So we created focus groups by interest. So we had early learning with AI, teacher productivity with AI, but also like assessment and AI, how these things, so based on teachers' interest to explore. And these groups would get together, share ideas, try ideas in their classrooms, and find out about these ideas. I think we are open to making mistakes also and evaluating if that use is the best use all the time. I think that we talk a lot about mistakes in education as being something that we expect and we actually want students to make. And institutions sometimes are so afraid to make mistakes or to say that we are also learning because it might sound that we are not prepared to teach the kids, but we are learning, especially with AI. So when an art teacher decides to try something different in the creative process and wants to see the result of that, I think it's valid. I think it's not only about let's try to do it because there is a purpose in testing its own concepts and processes. So I think it really depends on if I am pressuring the teachers to use it for the sake of using it, or if I'm allowing them, or we are as an institution, to explore with their students, but being transparent with the parents of there's no one in the world who knows all the answers for this right now. And we are careful. There's trust in this relationship, and we're not going to expose them to something that's really will harm them. So let's learn together and let's welcome the graceful errors that we also want to happen in the educational process.
I'll be succinct. I think that people are using AI, and by bringing it into our schools, it's one way to help us understand what's happening in our world. I think that in my role, at least, and I'm gonna just go out on a limb and say other three people on the stage with me experience something similar, which is anxiety around AI. And so by having the shared language and then by bringing it in super intentional ways, which I'm picking up here, it reduces anxiety. It helps us feel like we're not being left behind on one hand, but also on the other, that we understand one of these big changes that's happening in our world. But what I'm picking up from Roberta is that we should also be extremely intentional when AI is brought into the classroom. It should not just be used very widely and loosely. I think that Jack is your name. Jack and I were having a discussion in the previous session around Lego, and I got it right that time. It's not Legos, it's Lego. Anyway, the American thing. We were just discussing that idea of sometimes feeling pressure to use AI tools when it's not necessarily appropriate. And I actually wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. AI should not come into the class for AI's sake because it might usurp the learning from the learner. It should be brought in intentionally with teacher training, with support from people like us, and it should have a clear role to play in the learning. I think the thing that I'm afraid of happening is a student has Kimi or another AI installed on their computer and they're just readily using it at all times. And I found a question, boom, I'm going to just go to it. I don't evaluate its output. I just copy and paste it in, and I turn it in without evaluating, without weighing its responses. To me, that's unintentional AI use. So I think your role as a teacher, as somebody who helps students to understand when and how AI is used at key times, is crucial. And my final closing thought on this is, I think what you model really matters. Douglas said something earlier about the role that we play and how we use AI in our classrooms. I think it was Ethan Mollick said this phrase, secret cyborgs, and teachers often use AI in secret. They use it to create their slides. They use Gamma to make a beautiful slide deck, or they use it to make a visual, and they never disclose or state how it supported their thinking to come to the product that you see before them in the classroom. So actually what teachers might be unintentionally modeling is secrecy. So I would think about your role as being somebody who is narrating, here is when and how I use AI to support my thinking, and this is an ethical and appropriate use for you as a learner too. See how it didn't take away my thinking? It actually pushed my thinking further. So this is a very K-12 sort of conversation that I may be having. What I'm hoping for is by the time they get to university, they've internalized those ways of thinking. And they're using it to push their thinking further rather than I'm just going to use it to do the thing for me and I'm going to copy and paste it without reading it.
So I can say, being in Silicon Valley and seeing the companies that are making these very powerful AI models, they're right down the street. I can tell you that leadership in terms of education around AI is not coming from these companies. They do not care about the education portion because we are the smallest portion of their business. What they're driven toward is efficiency. They're trying to remove as much of the friction as possible from the work world by providing the cheapest, easiest, most powerful to use tools. Now, we know as teachers, friction is important in learn. That's where you learn, is from being stuck and from the struggle and from trying to figure things out. That's where learning comes from. And so the goals of Silicon Valley in many ways are opposed to the goals that we have as teachers. But I'll tell you that the people in this room, we are the ones to make that change, because we've done research into how students use AI. They're all using it, and they're using it for the most part very poorly. They don't really know how to prompt appropriately. They don't know what we know as teachers. And the reason why teachers are the best ones to help students figure this out is because a good prompt is like a good assignment. If you give a lousy assignment, write an essay, you're going to get the most bare bones basic essay. And so we've learned to provide parameters. The essay should be this long. It should cover these points. Here's what your process should be. You should do these things. We give all of this scaffolding because we know it results in a better product. We know this intuitively as teachers. That's our craft. It's exactly the same with AI. We need to be teaching students to do what we know so well as teachers. Now, the next thing on the horizon is this thing called agentic AI, where you create this AI bot or this AI tool and it goes out on your behalf and it does things. And we're all going to be hearing much more about these agentic AI models. And that shift from putting prompts into a chatbot to actually creating a bot and giving it parameters and then letting it act with some agency, that mirrors the shift that we have made over the years from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom. We, in effect, are trying to create agents. We're trying to create students with agency who can act semi-autonomously. We do it by crafting a policy set, a set of rules or a constitution to say, this is how you should behave. This is the new skill set for this generation. We need to be teaching them that, and there's no one better qualified to teach them those things than us.
That's amazing.
I got a goosebump.
That was so good.
I was like, oh my gosh, I got chills. But thank you all three. This is like a really great discussion, and I'm gonna add a very small portion there. I do notice that whenever it comes with AI in teaching and learning, and it doesn't rely solely on educators, it's not one-off efforts. It's a collaborative work, and with all different stakeholders, students, teachers, and parents, and also school as a whole community. Can everyone just join me? Thank all panelists. Just thank you, guys. You are here by just sharing, learning all together. You're already doing the right work. And so if you do have anything you want to share more, please feel free to grab one of our panelists and discuss with them. Thank you so much, everyone.